Since the beginning of warfare, the greatest warriors have found ways to tally their success, for both their allies and the enemy to see their kills. There is truly no better example of this than the combat aircraft of World War II. But not everyone knows the depth and meaning of some of these markings. So in this video, we will walk through the various types of victory markings, including some of the most rare seen on Allied aircraft, and how a pilot or crew member earned each one. Plus, as a bonus, I even have a few unknown symbols that I need to ask for your help with. So let's get into it. Before that though, here's a quick question. Do you care about keeping your heart healthy? If so, then you need to check out this video's sponsor, Human. Human SuperBeets heart chews support healthy blood pressure and give you healthy energy without the crash and without stimulants. And the benefits are no joke. Paired with a healthy lifestyle, the antioxidants in SuperBeets are clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. So don't wait until it's too late to start caring about your heart health. Double your potential with SuperBeets Heart Chews. Get a free 30-day supply of SuperBeets Heart Chews on all bundles and 15% off your first order by going to getsuperbeets.com and using code TJ3. That's getsuperbeets.com, code TJ3. Support TJ3 History and your heart at the same time with Human. Now, enjoy. To begin, let's start with the bombers and the most basic type of marking, the bomb tally. Most are aware that these were generally added to the sides of heavy and medium bombers for successful missions completed. And while these could vary in size and shape, a bomb was generally recognizable and carried the same meaning. However, there were some additional symbols that can be seen added to a bomb tally. And the most prominent example of this would be a star. Sometimes this would be added to a bomb or above it, and this meant that the aircraft successfully completed the bombing mission as a lead ship for that mission. Likewise, another variation that was rarely seen was putting the name of the city inside the bomb itself. I have nearly never seen this done, but it did happen. And lastly, for the bomb add-ons, a heart, representing a crew member wounded in action. This is another tally that is very hard to find, but would be one of the more important symbols that could be added to an aircraft's combat resume. One more interesting sort of bombing raid symbol that could be added was the ice cream cone. This was actually done almost exclusively by the Royal Air Force bombers. And any guesses to what this might have meant? Well, the correct answer is a mission to Italy. Before World War II broke out, the Italians in Britain were commonly associated with running ice cream shops, specifically gelato. And so ice cream was instantly associated with the Italians, and thus the symbol for a mission to Italy was born. And before we leave the bombing mission marks, here is one other fascinating mark that I have been able to locate. Looking past the bombs and ice cream cones on this Halifax named Pinocchio, we can see a swastika key for the 21st mission flown. I have not been able to decipher exactly what this represented, but if you do, let me know in the comments. Up next, we will take a look at some of the unorthodox markings that were used for atypical missions. First, we see the most basic, cargo drops or troop drops. These would have been obviously found on transport aircraft like the C-47, but that is not all of the tallies that might be found on a transport. This would have been painted on the side of an aircraft that was in the Chinese Burma India theater, as this represented a mission flown over the hump, which was the Himalayan path between India and China. An alternate version of this could sometimes be the mountain. But speaking of animals, another symbol that one might find on a bomber or even a transport could be a duck. This would represent a decoy mission. These were actually flown more commonly than one might realize, especially by the 8th Air Force trying to divert Luftwaffe fighters away from a real raid headed to another location.
At 14:30 hours, the Blue Force will threaten this entire coastal area of northwestern Germany. Which target will it be? Actually, it carries no bombs at all. It's a decoy and keeps the fighters from the northern area busy while the White Force, the main effort, heads for the submarine pens of Wilhelmshaven.
These were obviously less risky than a bomb symbol or a serious combat mission, as these forces often turned back early before the enemy could strike. But nonetheless, a mission was a mission, and some groups wanted to add that duck to the side of their bomber. Next, we will take a look at a famous symbol that could be found primarily on dive or torpedo bombers, and this was, of course, the enemy ship. This could be sinking or floating and obviously represented a claim of a ship destroyed. In reality, this was one of the most difficult tallies to claim, and photos of aircraft with one or more are extremely rare. But still here on this B-17, for example, we can see quite a track record of sinking ships. Obviously, recon planes too added their own tallies. Their symbols were often something resembling an eye or a camera. Finally, we find ourselves in the fighter category, likely the most interesting and the most intricate. The most basic and common symbols that we see on fighter aircraft are, of course, air-to-air kills. These were commonly denoted by flags or roundels of the enemy, and while they had different variations among fighter groups, they all meant the same thing: the destruction of an enemy aircraft. Sometimes this could be a cross, a swastika, a full flag, or even a half flag for a half kill. And sometimes even more detailed symbols can be found. And these were not just reserved for fighters, as bombers oftentimes also added swastikas for gunner kills, as can be seen most notably on the Memphis Belle. There were, however, some even rarer variations that might be found. Here we can see a P-47 of the 56th Fighter Group. This aircraft, Pingy 4, was one of the few 8th Air Force aircraft that I have seen who made a differentiation in kill markings for aerial kills and grounded aircraft kills. Some pilots did not count these at all, and a handful of them counted them as regular kills. But Pingy's pilot here had red crosses for ground kills and white ones for air-to-air victories, becoming an ace in both categories. In some theaters, other variations can also be seen, with a few pilots who would simply paint the silhouette of an aircraft destroyed with a single engine for fighters or a double engine for bombers. This, however, was more often found in the Pacific theater. And speaking of the Pacific, as you might notice, nearly all of the aircraft shown in this video so far have been Army Air Corps or Army Air Force aircraft. That is because the Navy and the Marines did not generally allow painting of their aircraft, especially for nose art. In addition to simply being stricter, this was also because in the Navy and the Marines, oftentimes pilots did not keep the same aircraft from mission to mission, but simply flew whatever aircraft they were assigned to, or that was available. This made tallies hard to track even if they were allowed to do so. However, like all areas of war, there were exceptions to this rule. The most common was kill tallies, especially for Navy and Marine fighter aces, as even the stricter branches had to recognize that a good photo of a pilot with his tally of rising sun flags was excellent for propaganda and equally as good for morale. Fascinatingly though, while aircraft were rarely tallied, the sides of carrier towers were very commonly painted with victory markings. So just because they were not on the aircraft does not mean that these were not scored. Now, moving on from air-to-air kills, we transition to ground scores for fighter pilots. The most common targets for strafers and bombers, especially of the 8th Air Force, were trains and bridges. Obviously, there is no shortage of gun camera footage showing the destruction of trains and vehicles in Europe from Mustangs and Thunderbolts. But what is less common is the train or armored vehicle on the side of an aircraft. This is because most units did not tally these scores, as they were difficult to give individual credit for, and oftentimes even harder to confirm. But nonetheless, some units, most likely low-level support groups, did paint them, with some even distinguishing between tanks, cars, locomotives, or even, in a case like this one, flat cars. Another rare symbol that might be found on a fighter or even a dive bomber would be a bridge. These were obviously often attacked, but again, individual crediting was usually difficult to establish. This brings us to my final and perhaps favorite group of symbols. These would be the specific mission identifiers. These would be used exclusively by American fighters, and specifically those in Europe. And although their meanings are fairly unknown, these are quite common. First, we see the broom. This was a symbol painted on fighters as a representation of a successful fighter sweep mission. Many photos exist of aircraft with a number of these brooms underneath the cockpit. And oftentimes, painted nearby, we can also see the umbrella. These were used for top cover missions, where fighters would fly above other fighter flights below, often while they attacked ground targets. Sometimes a bomb would also be added underneath the umbrella if the top cover was flown for a bombing raid. This is not to be confused with an escort mission, which had a different symbol entirely. For a successful escort mission, a top hat with a cane was generally used as a representation for this and can be seen on a number of American fighters. Obviously, not all units added such markings for each mission, but there were those that did. And this brings us to one final interesting symbol that I was unable to confirm the meaning of. Here on P-51 Atlanta Peach, we can see 5 silhouettes, marching or walking. And in all honesty, I have not been able to find the meaning of this. So why don't you guys give it a try and see if you can figure it out, and comment your findings below. If you want me to make more videos like this, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.